Welcome. If you're searching for truth tonight, for answers hidden in ancient texts that somehow speak directly to our modern chaos, you've arrived at exactly the right moment. What you're about to discover isn't just history. It's a doorway into mysteries that have been sealed for millennia, waiting for those brave enough to look beyond the surface of Scripture. Tonight we journey into one of the most extraordinary lives ever recorded. A man who stood in the courts of kings yet bowed only to God. A prophet who decoded dreams that predicted the rise and fall of empires centuries before they existed. A captive who became a kingmaker. A teenager torn from his homeland who died in exile yet left a legacy that reverberates through eternity. But here's what most people miss. Daniel's story isn't primarily about lions or fiery furnaces. Those are the Sunday school versions, sanitized and safe. The real story is far more dangerous. It's about invisible wars fought in heavenly realms. It's about fallen angels masquerading as gods. It's about prophecies so accurate that skeptics have spent 2,000 years trying to discredit them. It's about a cosmic conflict between light and darkness that's still raging today. Before we descend into these mysteries, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel right now. What we're about to uncover will challenge everything you thought you knew about biblical prophecy, spiritual warfare, and the end times. You don't want to miss what's coming next. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what mysteries about Daniel you're most curious about. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to a moment when the world shifted, when an empire that seemed invincible crumbled in a single day, when young men were ripped from their families and thrust into a darkness that would test their souls, when heaven and hell collided over the fate of God's chosen people. The year is 605 BC. Jerusalem, the city of David, the dwelling place of God's presence, stands on the edge of annihilation. For decades, prophets have warned that judgment is coming. Jeremiah walks the streets weeping, declaring that Babylon will conquer them because they've abandoned the covenant. But who listens to prophets when the wine flows freely and the temple still stands gleaming in the sun? King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon is marching toward Jerusalem with the most powerful military force the ancient world has ever assembled. His army doesn't just conquer cities, it erases them from history. And Nebuchadnezzar has ambitions that go beyond mere conquest. He wants to become a god. He wants to build a kingdom that will last forever. He wants to challenge heaven itself. What Nebuchadnezzar doesn't know is that he's about to meet a teenager who will expose the futility of his ambitions. A young man named Daniel who carries within him something more powerful than all of Babylon's armies combined. The Spirit of the Living God. Chapter 1. When heaven went silent. The siege of Jerusalem lasted longer than anyone expected. The Babylonian army surrounded the city like a noose slowly tightening around a throat. Inside the walls, food supplies dwindled. Children cried from hunger. The elderly collapsed in the streets. King Jehoiakim, who had foolishly rebelled against Babylon, now faced the consequences of his arrogance. And the people of Jerusalem, who had ignored prophet after prophet, finally understood that their day of reckoning had arrived. But here's what makes this moment so profoundly disturbing. Where was God? For generations, Jerusalem had been called the City of God. The temple housed the Ark of the Covenant, the physical manifestation of God's presence. The Israelites had believed, perhaps naively, that God would never allow his city to fall, that his temple could never be destroyed, that his chosen people were invincible as long as they had the sacred objects in their possession. They were about to learn a terrifying truth. God's protection isn't automatic. Covenant blessings come with covenant responsibilities. And when a nation becomes so corrupt, so unjust, so deaf to divine warnings that it's beyond redemption, even God's chosen people can face judgment. The Book of Enoch, removed from most modern Bibles but preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, speaks about the Watchers, those angels who descended to earth and corrupted humanity in the days before the flood. These fallen beings taught humans forbidden knowledge, warfare, cosmetics, enchantments, astrology, and the secrets of manipulating spiritual forces. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were giants who filled the earth with violence. God destroyed that corrupted world with a flood, but the spiritual forces behind that corruption were never fully destroyed. They merely changed their tactics. By the time Jerusalem fell, these same demonic forces had infiltrated the very heart of God's people. The worship of Molech, which involved sacrificing children in fire, was practiced openly. Temple prostitution, stolen directly from Babylonian occult rituals, flourished. The prophets who still spoke for God were hunted, imprisoned, murdered. The spiritual darkness was so thick that even the righteous trembled. Daniel was approximately 16 years old when the walls finally broke. Imagine being that age and watching everything you've ever known consumed by flames. The screaming, the blood, the soldiers dragging your neighbors away in chains. Your mother clutching you one final time before rough hands tear you away. Your father's face helpless as you're forced into a line of other young men, all of you stripped of your identities, your futures stolen in an instant. The Babylonians were strategic in their cruelty. They didn't just want territory, they wanted the next generation. They specifically selected the brightest, strongest, most mobile young men from Jerusalem. These weren't random captives, these were future leaders, scholars, the best of Israel's youth. And the plan was simple: erase their Hebrew identity completely, transform them into loyal Babylonians who would administer the conquered territories without rebellion. The march to Babylon covered over 500 miles of desert. Many died along the way. The weak collapsed and were left for vultures. The defiant were beaten until they learned submission. And all along that agonizing journey, Daniel had time to think, time to question, time to decide who he would become in this nightmare. Would he curse God for allowing this? Would he abandon faith in a deity who seemed to have abandoned his people? Would he conclude, like so many others, that Babylon's gods must be stronger since they had prevailed? Or would he come to understand something deeper, something that would sustain him through decades of exile? Scripture tells us that Daniel resolved in his heart not to defile himself. But that resolution didn't happen in a vacuum. It came from wrestling with impossible questions in the darkest moments of his life. How do you maintain faith when your world is destroyed? How do you believe in God's goodness when you're experiencing unspeakable evil? How do you hold on to identity when everything that defined you has been stripped away? The answer Daniel discovered is the same answer that has sustained believers through every persecution, every exile, every dark night of the soul throughout history. God's faithfulness doesn't depend on our circumstances. His promises aren't nullified by our suffering. His sovereignty isn't threatened by earthly kingdoms, no matter how powerful they appear. When Daniel finally saw Babylon rising from the desert horizon, he wasn't seeing just a city. He was seeing the physical manifestation of spiritual rebellion. Babylon, even in Daniel's day, was ancient. Its roots stretched back to Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, that first great attempt to build a kingdom that could reach heaven without God. Genesis 10 and 11 tell us that Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord, which ancient rabbinical texts interpret not as hunting animals, but hunting human souls. He was establishing a system of idolatry, a counterfeit religion designed to replace worship of the true God. The Tower of Babel wasn't just a building project. It was humanity's declaration of independence from God. It was an attempt to storm heaven itself, to make a name for themselves, to establish their own glory rather than reflecting God's glory. God scattered that ancient rebellion by confusing their languages, but the spirit behind Babel never died. It simply moved, evolved, waited, and by Daniel's time, it had reconstituted itself in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. The city itself was designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. The outer walls were so thick that chariot races were held on top of them. The Ishtar Gate, decorated with blue glazed bricks and golden images of dragons and bulls, stood over 70 feet high. The Hanging Gardens, built by Nebuchadnezzar for his homesick Median wife, were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Ziggurats, massive step pyramids used for astrological observations and occult rituals, dominated the skyline. Everywhere you looked, images of Marduk, Babylon's chief deity, declared this city's spiritual allegiance. And here's what most people don't understand about ancient paganism. These weren't just statues. The people didn't worship the stone or metal. They believed these images were inhabited by actual spiritual entities. They were worshipping demons, fallen angels who had set themselves up as gods, demanding sacrifice and obedience and worship that belonged only to the Creator. When Daniel was processed into Babylon's education system, he was entering enemy territory in the most literal sense. This wasn't just a cultural clash, it was a spiritual invasion. Everything about the 3-year training program was designed to sever his connection to the God of Israel and bind him to Babylon's demonic deities. They changed his name from Daniel, meaning God is my judge, to Belteshazzar, meaning Bel protect his life. Bel was another name for Marduk. From day one, they were linguistically coding his identity to Babylon's gods. His 3 friends underwent similar transformations. Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, Azariah became Abednego. Hebrew names honoring Yahweh were replaced with names honoring pagan deities. But a name is just a sound. What truly threatened to destroy them was the food. The king's meat and wine weren't merely rich delicacies. They were first offered to idols in elaborate rituals. Eating them meant participating in demon worship. It meant declaring allegiance to Babylon's spiritual powers. It meant breaking the first and greatest commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me." This is where Daniel's steel core revealed itself. He could accept a new name because names are external labels. He could study Babylonian literature and learn their language because knowledge itself isn't evil. But he absolutely would not compromise on worshipping the true God, even symbolically, even in a seemingly small thing like food. So he proposed a test. Give us only vegetables and water for 10 days. Then compare our health to those eating the king's food. Let the results speak for themselves. This wasn't Daniel being legalistic about diet. This was Daniel drawing a line and saying, "This far and no further, I will not bow to your gods. Not today, not ever." The official who supervised them was terrified. If these Hebrew boys grew weak and sickly on their restricted diet, it could cost him his head. But something in Daniel's demeanor convinced him to take the risk, and at the end of 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and stronger than all the others. Was this just good nutrition, or was God honoring their faithfulness? The text suggests both. God gave them favor, but it also mentions they were 10 times wiser than all the magicians and enchanters in the kingdom. Something supernatural was happening. By refusing to be spiritually contaminated, they had opened a channel for divine wisdom that the others, for all their occult knowledge, could never access. Let me ask you something. If you were torn from your home, thrust into a hostile culture, pressured to compromise your faith in ways that seem minor on the surface but are profound in their implications, would you stand firm? Would you risk your life over what you eat? Would you maintain your identity when blending in could save you? Comment below and be honest. This isn't about judgment. It's about understanding the price of faithfulness. And subscribe if you haven't already, because what comes next will blow your mind. Daniel is about to face his first major test. A king is going to have a dream so terrifying that he forgets it completely. And every wise man in Babylon, including Daniel, is going to be sentenced to death because no one can tell the king what he dreamed. How does Daniel survive? And what does this ancient dream have to do with our world today, in 2025? The answer will shock you. Chapter 2. The dream that decoded history. King Nebuchadnezzar couldn't sleep. Night after night, he tossed on his royal bed, his mind churning with images he couldn't quite grasp. His empire was at its peak. His military was undefeated. His building projects were transforming Babylon into the wonder of the world. Yet something gnawed at him, an unease, a sense that despite all his power, despite all his glory, something much larger than himself was in motion. Then came the dream. It hit him with the force of divine revelation. Images flooded his sleeping mind with such clarity, such intensity, that he woke gasping. His heart hammered against his ribs, sweat drenched his sheets, and the certainty that he'd just witnessed something of cosmic importance overwhelmed him. This wasn't an ordinary dream. This was a message, but from whom, and what did it mean? Here's where the story takes a bizarre turn. Nebuchadnezzar couldn't remember the dream. The moment he woke, the images scattered like smoke. He was left with only the terror, the certainty of importance, and the maddening inability to recall what he'd seen. Have you ever experienced that? A dream so vivid that it feels more real than reality, but the instant you try to grasp it, it vanishes. That's what happened to the most powerful man on earth, and his response reveals his character. In the middle of the night, Nebuchadnezzar summoned every wise man in his kingdom. Magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, enchanters, diviners, every practitioner of occult arts rushed to the throne room. The king was not patient. "I had a dream. Tell me what I dreamed and what it means." The wise men were confused. "O king, live forever. Tell us the dream and we will interpret it." That's how it always worked. The king describes his dream. The magicians consult their demon spirits and their charts and their rituals, and they provide an interpretation, sometimes accurate, often completely fabricated to please the king. But Nebuchadnezzar was smarter than they expected. "If you can't tell me what I dreamed, how do I know your interpretation is genuine? You could be making it all up, telling me what you think I want to hear." "No. If you truly have supernatural knowledge, prove it. Tell me the dream itself." The wise men panicked. No king, no matter how great, has ever asked such a thing. What you're demanding is impossible. No human can reveal the king's dream. Only the gods could do that, and they don't dwell among mortals. They had just admitted something crucial. Despite all their rituals, all their incantations, all their claims to supernatural power, they were frauds. Oh, they might have had some demonic assistance in certain matters. The spiritual forces behind paganism are real, but they couldn't read the king's mind. They couldn't retrieve a forgotten dream. Their powers had limits. Nebuchadnezzar's rage erupted like a volcano. "Execute them all. Every wise man in Babylon dies today, and tear down their houses while you're at it." This wasn't an idle threat. Ancient kings didn't bluff. The death warrant went out immediately. Guards fanned across the city to arrest and execute every person who claimed wisdom or magical knowledge, and that included Daniel. He and his 3 friends, having graduated from their training program with the highest honors, were now classified as wise men of Babylon. They had done nothing wrong. They hadn't even been present at the midnight meeting, yet they were condemned to die along with all the charlatans and demon worshippers. When Arioch, commander of the king's guard, came to arrest Daniel, most people would have panicked, begged for mercy, raged at the injustice. But Daniel did something remarkable. He asked a simple question: why has the king issued such a harsh decree? He didn't assume. He didn't react emotionally. He gathered information first. Arioch explained the situation, and Daniel saw an opportunity where everyone else saw only death. "Give me time. I will tell the king what he dreamed and what it means." The audacity of that statement is staggering. Every wise man in Babylon had just declared the task impossible, and this Hebrew exile, barely into his 20s, is promising to do what no one else could do. But Daniel had something the others lacked. He wasn't relying on demons or occult knowledge or his own cleverness. He served the God who knows all things, sees all things, and reveals mysteries to those who seek him in faith. Daniel rushed to find Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "We need to pray now, urgently. If God doesn't reveal this mystery, we die before sunrise." So they prayed. 4 young men far from home, facing execution for crimes they didn't commit, crying out to the God of their fathers to do the impossible. This wasn't casual prayer. This wasn't religious routine. This was desperate, life or death intercession. And that night, God answered. In a vision, God showed Daniel everything. Not just the interpretation, but the actual dream Nebuchadnezzar had forgotten. Every detail, every symbol, every layer of meaning. When Daniel woke, he didn't immediately run to save his own life. First, he praised God. He worshipped. He acknowledged that the ability to reveal mysteries belongs to God alone. That tells you everything about Daniel's character. Even facing death, his first response was gratitude and worship. The next morning, Daniel told Arioch, "Don't execute the wise men. Take me to the king. I'll tell him his dream." Standing before Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel had a choice. He could take credit. He could position himself as uniquely gifted. He could use this moment to secure his status and guarantee his future. Instead, he deflected all glory to God. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. Then Daniel described the dream with perfect accuracy. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes widened, his breath caught. This was exactly what he had seen. Every detail matched the fragments of memory that had been haunting him. "You saw a massive statue, Your Majesty, enormous and dazzling, terrifying in appearance. The head of this statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay." The king nodded, completely focused now. This Hebrew knew. But how? While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar was stunned. This was it. This was the dream that had filled him with such terror and awe. But what did it mean? Daniel took a breath and began explaining a prophecy that would unfold over the next 25 centuries. A prophecy so accurate that skeptics still argue it must have been written after the events it describes. A prophecy that's still relevant today, in 2025, as we watch global powers realign in ways that eerily echo Daniel's ancient words. "Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold." Flattery? No. Acknowledgement of reality. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian Empire was indeed the dominant superpower of its era. From the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, from Egypt to the borders of India, Babylon's influence extended farther than any previous kingdom. The golden head represented not just Nebuchadnezzar personally, but the Babylonian system of absolute monarchy, unified power, golden splendor. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. Inferior? Nebuchadnezzar probably couldn't fathom it. What kingdom could surpass Babylon? Yet history confirms Daniel's words with precision. In 539 BC, the Medo-Persian Empire conquered Babylon without a battle. The silver chest and arms represented this dual kingdom. The Medes and Persians united, inferior not in size or military might, but in unity and glory. Persia was a coalition, not an absolute monarchy. Silver, not gold. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. This was Greece under Alexander the Great. Bronze was the metal of Greek warfare. Their shields, their armor, their weapons were famous for their bronze craftsmanship. Alexander's conquests spread Greek culture across the known world with unprecedented speed. But bronze, while valuable, is worth less than silver. Each successive kingdom, Daniel prophesied, would be less glorious than the one before. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Rome, the Iron Empire. Its legions were legendary. its military engineering unmatched, its rule so extensive that the Mediterranean became a Roman lake. From Britain to Mesopotamia, from Germania to North Africa, Rome crushed all opposition. Iron fist, iron will, iron law. But then the prophecy gets even more specific. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. It will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. The Roman Empire did split, east and west, Constantinople and Rome, and from that division emerged the nations of Europe, a mixture that has never fully united. Think about it. Since Rome fell in the 5th century AD, there have been repeated attempts to reunite Europe under one rule. Charlemagne tried, Napoleon tried, Hitler tried, the European Union tries today, but iron and clay don't bond. Political unity without cultural and spiritual unity is inherently unstable. Here's where it gets prophetically explosive. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. The rock cut without human hands. A kingdom not established by military conquest or political maneuvering. Christians identify this as the kingdom of God established through Jesus Christ, which began during the Roman Empire and has spread to every nation on earth, outlasting every earthly kingdom that has tried to destroy it. But many biblical scholars also see a future fulfillment, a final establishment of God's reign when Christ returns to judge the world and establish eternal righteousness. Like this revelation? Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And comment below, do you believe we're still living in the iron and clay phase of history? Are we witnessing the final formation before the rock strikes? Your perspective matters. When Daniel finished explaining, Nebuchadnezzar did something no one expected. The most powerful man on earth fell on his face before this Hebrew captive. Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. The king showered Daniel with gifts, gold and purple robes and authority. He promoted him to ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all the wise men whose lives he'd just saved. Daniel also requested positions for his 3 friends, and they too were elevated to high administrative roles. But power brings danger, and the higher you rise, the more enemies you make. Daniel and his friends were about to face a test that would require them to choose between life and faithfulness, between compromise and courage, between bowing to a golden image or burning in a furnace. What they chose would echo through eternity. Coming up next, we're going to witness one of the most dramatic confrontations in biblical history, and we're going to explore something most pastors won't tell you: the spiritual forces behind that golden statue and what they reveal about spiritual warfare in our own time. Stay with me. Chapter 3: The Statue and the Furnace When Demons Wine Worship Years Past. Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream proved devastatingly accurate, but the king couldn't accept it. The idea that his golden empire would be replaced by lesser kingdoms grated against everything he believed about himself. He had built Babylon into the greatest city on earth. He had conquered nation after nation. He stood at the pinnacle of human achievement, and some Hebrew prophet dared to say it would all crumble into dust. So Nebuchadnezzar decided to rewrite prophecy. If God's dream showed a statue declining from gold to clay, he would build a statue entirely of gold, from head to toe, 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, erected on the plain of Dura, a monument to his own glory, a declaration that his kingdom would last forever, that he could override heaven's decree through sheer force of will. But this wasn't just about ego. The statue wasn't merely a monument, it was an idol. And the dedication ceremony wasn't merely political theater, It was a mass ritual of demon worship designed to spiritually bind every official in the empire to Babylon's dark powers. Let me explain something most modern Christians don't understand about ancient paganism. The idols weren't just art. The pagans weren't stupid. They didn't think the stone or gold itself was divine. They believed these images were dwelling places for spiritual entities. 1 Corinthians 10:20 makes this explicit. The sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God, and I do not want you to be participants with demons. When you bowed to an idol, you weren't bowing to metal. You were acknowledging, honoring, and submitting to the demonic entity that inhabited that image. You were opening yourself spiritually to its influence. You were forming a covenant bond, however unconscious, with forces of darkness. The Book of Jubilees, another text preserved in the Ethiopian Bible, explains that after the flood, demons were bound but not destroyed. They were allowed to remain on earth under the authority of Mastema, their chief, to test and tempt humanity. These are the same spirits that motivated paganism, demanded sacrifice, thirsted for worship that belonged only to God. Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue was a gateway, a portal through which demonic forces could consolidate their control over the empire's entire leadership structure. And the decree was absolute. When the music plays, everyone bows, no exceptions. Refusal means death by fire. The dedication day arrived. Governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled on the plain of Dura. Thousands of the empire's elite, dressed in their finest, gathered before the towering golden monstrosity gleaming in the sun. A herald shouted the decree. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. The musicians lifted their instruments. The first notes sounded across the plain, and like a wave, thousands of people dropped to the ground in synchronized submission. Every single person bowed, every knee bent, every face pressed into the dust. Every single person except three. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood alone in a sea of prostrate humanity. Can you imagine the courage that required? The pressure to conform must have been crushing. Everyone around you is bowing. The threat is immediate and real. Nobody would blame you. You could rationalize it 1,000 ways. It's just political theater. God knows your heart. You can be faithful in other ways. Just bow for 1 second and live to serve God another day. But these three men understood something profound. There are moments when compromise is impossible. Moments when 1 second of submission is 1 second too much. Moments when you have to stand even if you stand completely alone. Certain astrologers, Babylonian officials who resented the success of these Hebrew foreigners, saw their opportunity. They rushed to Nebuchadnezzar with accusations dripping with xenophobia. "O king, live forever. There are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Notice how they emphasized Jews, foreigners, outsiders. The king promoted these exiles over us, and look how they repay his generosity. This was an appeal not just to authority, but to ethnic resentment. It's the same tactic used throughout history to persecute God's people. Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage. He summoned the three men and gave them one more chance. "Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the image I have set up? When you hear the music again, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" That last sentence reveals the heart of the issue. This was never about civil obedience. This was about ultimate allegiance. Nebuchadnezzar, despite all he'd witnessed, still believed he was the highest authority, that his power superseded any god's ability to intervene. That he controlled life and death? Absolutely. The response of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego has echoed through 25 centuries as one of the greatest declarations of faith ever uttered. O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Pause and absorb that. But even if he does not, they believed God could save them. They hoped he would, but they acknowledged he might not, and their obedience wasn't conditional on the outcome. This is faith stripped to its purest essence, faithfulness regardless of consequences, trust without guarantees, obedience even unto death. This infuriated Nebuchadnezzar beyond reason, his face twisted with rage. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal. He commanded his strongest soldiers to tie up the 3 men and throw them in fully clothed. The soldiers obeyed, but the furnace was so superheated that the flames killed them before they could complete the task. The heat was beyond what human flesh could withstand, even from a distance. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego tumbled into the inferno, bound and helpless. By every physical law, they should have been incinerated instantly. Flesh cannot survive temperatures that killed trained soldiers from outside the furnace. This should have been the tragic end of 3 faithful men who stood for principle and paid the ultimate price. Except Nebuchadnezzar suddenly leaped to his feet, his face white with shock. Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. This is where the story transcends human categories and enters into divine mystery. There was a 4th figure in that furnace, someone who looked like a son of the gods in Nebuchadnezzar's pagan terminology. Christians throughout history have identified this as a Christophany, a pre-incarnation appearance of Jesus Christ. Others identify it as Michael the Archangel or another heavenly being sent to protect God's servants. Whoever he was, his presence changed everything. The fire that killed soldiers from outside couldn't harm the 3 men inside. The ropes that bound them burned away, but not a hair on their heads was singed. Their clothes weren't scorched. There wasn't even a smell of smoke on them. This wasn't just survival. This was a complete negation of physical laws. Fire doesn't choose who to burn. Heat doesn't discriminate. Yet here were 3 men walking around inside an inferno, chatting with a divine visitor, completely unharmed while the flames raged around them. Here's the lesson everyone misses. God didn't keep them out of the fire. He met them in it. That's how he often works. He doesn't always prevent the trial. Sometimes he walks through it with us, and his presence transforms the trial from something that destroys us into something that only destroys what binds us. Subscribe right now if you're seeing this truth clearly for the first time, and share this with someone who's in their own furnace right now. Someone who needs to know they're not alone in the flames. Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." When they emerged, all the officials crowded around them, examining them in disbelief. No burns, no injuries, nothing. The king's response is telling. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God's power. He issued a decree protecting the worship of the God of Israel. He promoted the 3 men to even higher positions. But notice something crucial. He didn't convert. He didn't abandon his other gods. He just added the God of Israel to his collection of powerful deities. He saw what happened, but he didn't truly understand. Real transformation would require something more. Something that would strip away every shred of pride. Something that would reduce the mightiest king on earth to an animal crawling in the wilderness. And that horror was coming. But before we get there, we need to understand something about Babylon itself and the dark spiritual forces that built it. Coming next, we'll explore the occult foundations of Babylon, the Nephilim connections, and archaeological discoveries that confirm the biblical account in ways that will astound you. Don't go anywhere. Chapter 4, Babylon's Dark Foundations, Nephilim, Nimrod, and the Tower. To understand Daniel's story fully, we need to dig deeper into Babylon's spiritual history. This city wasn't random. It wasn't just another ancient empire. Babylon represents something far more sinister in biblical theology. It's the physical manifestation of spiritual rebellion that stretches all the way back to the days after the flood. Genesis 10 introduces us to Nimrod, described as a mighty warrior on the earth and the founder of Babylon. The name Nimrod comes from the Hebrew root marat, meaning to rebel. This wasn't a coincidence. Ancient Jewish traditions preserved in texts like the Book of Jasher and various midrashic writings describe Nimrod as the first post-flood king who openly defied God and established a system of idolatry. But here's where it gets fascinating and disturbing. Nimrod's rebellion didn't happen in a vacuum. The Book of Enoch, considered scripture by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and quoted in the New Testament Book of Jude, tells us what happened before the flood. A group of angels called Watchers descended to earth and took human women as wives. These unions produced offspring called Nephilim, giants who were mighty men of renown but filled the earth with violence and corruption. Genesis 6:4 confirms this. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. That phrase, and also afterward, is crucial. It means Nephilim existed after the flood, not just before it. How is that possible if the flood destroyed all flesh except Noah's family? The answer lies in understanding that the Nephilim were not just genetically unusual humans. They carried within them a spiritual corruption that didn't die with the flood. Numbers 13,033 records that when the Israelite spies entered Canaan, they saw Nephilim, descendants of Anak, and felt like grasshoppers in comparison. King Og of Bashan, whom Israel defeated, had a bed 13 feet long. Goliath stood over 9 feet tall. These weren't metaphors. These were literal giants, physical evidence of genetic corruption. Nimrod, according to ancient Jewish sources, was himself a Nephilim or descended from that corrupted bloodline. The Tower of Babel wasn't just a building. It was a ziggurat, a gateway designed to facilitate communication between earth and the heavenly realms, but not with God. It was an occult structure intended to contact the fallen watchers and their demonic followers to harness supernatural power for human ambition. When God confused the languages at Babel, he wasn't just stopping a construction project. He was disrupting a system of demonic collaboration that threatened to corrupt all of humanity again. But while he scattered the people, he didn't destroy the spiritual forces that motivated them. Those forces simply distributed across the earth, establishing different pagan systems in different cultures, all rooted in the same rebellion. Babylon, built on the site of ancient Babel, carried that rebellious DNA forward. By Daniel's time, the city was the epicenter of occult knowledge. Babylonian astrology, which claimed to predict the future by reading the stars, was actually a system of contacting and interpreting messages from demonic entities. The Chaldeans, the priestly class of Babylon, were famous throughout the ancient world for their magical arts, their ability to interpret dreams and omens, their knowledge of curses and spells. This is what Daniel was walking into. This wasn't just cultural difference. This was the front line of spiritual warfare. Every temple in Babylon, every ritual, every statue was connected to entities that had been in rebellion against God since before the flood. And Daniel, a teenage captive, was being trained to become part of that system. Archaeological discoveries have confirmed the biblical account in stunning ways. The Ishtar Gate, excavated and partially reconstructed in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, features images of dragons and bulls that match ancient descriptions of the creatures associated with Marduk and other Babylonian deities. Cuneiform tablets recovered from Babylon include incantations, demon summoning rituals, and magical formulas that reveal just how dark Babylonian spirituality truly was. One particularly chilling discovery was a series of clay tablets describing the Akitu festival, Babylon's New Year's celebration. During this 12-day ritual, the king would enter the temple of Marduk, be ritually humiliated by the high priest, then reinstated as Marduk's representative on earth. The ceremony included dramatic reenactments of Marduk's victory over Tiamat, the Chaos Dragon, and culminated in a sacred marriage ritual involving temple prostitution. This wasn't just ceremony, this was a spiritual pact renewed annually, binding the entire empire to demonic powers. Daniel lived and worked in this environment. He saw the rituals, he knew the practitioners, he understood exactly what these people were doing and what entities they were serving. And yet, he maintained his faith, his purity, his connection to the true God. That's not just admirable, that's miraculous. But Nebuchadnezzar, despite witnessing miracle after miracle, remained trapped in Babylon's spiritual darkness. He acknowledged God's power, but he didn't submit to God's authority. He added Yahweh to his pantheon, but didn't abandon his other deities, and that divided loyalty was about to cost him everything. Coming up, we're going to witness one of the most bizarre and terrifying judgments recorded in Scripture. Nebuchadnezzar is going to have another dream, this time about a massive tree that gets cut down, and Daniel, with tears in his eyes, is going to tell the king that he's about to lose his mind and live like an animal for 7 years. Why? And what does this ancient madness tell us about pride, power, and the limits of human glory? Don't miss what comes next. If this deep dive into Babylon's dark history is opening your eyes, smash that like button and drop a comment. What aspect of Daniel's story do you want me to explore more deeply? I'm listening. Chapter 5. The Tree That Fell Nebuch, My Michad Nenzier's Madness. Time has a way of eroding the lessons we've learned. Nebuchadnezzar had witnessed impossible miracles. He'd seen Daniel interpret a dream no one else could recall. He'd watched 3 men survive a furnace that killed his own soldiers. He'd issued decrees acknowledging the power of the God of Israel. But as years passed and Babylon continued to prosper, the king's humility faded and his ego inflated. He looked at Babylon's walls, the thickest ever constructed. He admired the hanging gardens he'd built for his wife. He walked through palaces that glittered with gold and jewels. He reviewed armies that had never been defeated, and slowly, insidiously, he began to believe that all of this was his achievement, his wisdom, his power, his glory. Pride is the original sin, the one that caused Lucifer's fall from heaven. Isaiah 14:12-15 records the boast that led to Satan's expulsion. I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High. That same pride, that same delusion of self-sufficiency, that same refusal to acknowledge dependence on God had infected Nebuchadnezzar. Then came another dream. This time, Nebuchadnezzar remembered every detail. He saw a tree in the middle of the earth, growing large and strong, its top reaching the sky, visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, providing food for all. Wild animals found shelter beneath it. Birds nested in its branches. Every creature was sustained by this tree. Then a holy one, a messenger, came down from heaven and shouted, "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him." The dream terrified Nebuchadnezzar. He summoned all his wise men, all his magicians and enchanters and astrologers and diviners. He described the dream in detail, but none of them could interpret it, not one. Whether they genuinely didn't understand or whether they were too afraid to tell the king what it meant, the text doesn't say, but they all failed. Finally, Nebuchadnezzar called for Daniel, whom he still knew by his Babylonian name, Belteshazzar. I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream, interpret it for me. He recounted the entire vision, and Daniel's reaction tells us everything about his character. Daniel was troubled, alarmed, silent for a time. He didn't want to deliver this message. Nebuchadnezzar, seeing Daniel's distress, tried to reassure him, "Do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you." But Daniel replied, "My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries." Think about that. Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed Daniel's homeland, killed Daniel's people, dragged Daniel into exile, enslaved him in a foreign land. Every reason existed for Daniel to hate this king, to rejoice in his coming judgment. But Daniel had compassion. He genuinely didn't want to see Nebuchadnezzar suffer, even though the king deserved every bit of what was coming. Then Daniel explained the dream. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the beasts of the field, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds of the air. You, O king, are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. So far, this was flattering. But then came the hard part. You, O king, saw a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, "Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump, bound with iron and bronze, in the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him." Daniel took a breath and delivered the interpretation. "This is the decree the Most High has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes." Imagine receiving that prophecy. You're going to lose your mind. You're going to lose your throne. You're going to lose your very humanity. For 7 years, you'll be reduced to an animal, crawling in the wilderness, eating grass covered in dew, your hair growing like feathers, your nails like claws. The greatest king on earth will become less than the lowliest beggar. But Daniel wasn't finished. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. There was hope. This wasn't permanent destruction. This was discipline. Severe, humiliating, terrifying discipline. But discipline nonetheless. God hadn't given up on Nebuchadnezzar. He was teaching him the most important lesson of his life. You are not God. You are not self-made. Everything you have exists because I allow it. Acknowledge that truth and you can be restored. Then Daniel did something remarkable. He gave the king advice on how to potentially avoid or delay the judgment. "Therefore, O king, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue." This is compassion. This is mercy. Daniel, knowing what was coming, still offered Nebuchadnezzar a way out. Repent, change, turn from pride to humility, from oppression to kindness, from self-glorification to acknowledging God. Maybe, just maybe, the judgment can be averted. 12 months passed. A full year during which Nebuchadnezzar had time to reflect, to change, to humble himself. But he didn't. Life went on. The empire prospered, and gradually the king convinced himself that the dream was just a scare, that it wouldn't really happen, that he could continue as he always had. Then one day, Nebuchadnezzar was walking on the roof of his royal palace. He looked out over Babylon, the city he had transformed into the wonder of the world. The walls, the palaces, the temples, the gardens, all of it gleaming in the sun. And pride, that ancient enemy of the soul, swelled within him. He spoke aloud. "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power? and for the glory of my majesty." The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. Immediately, not gradually, but instantly, the prophecy was fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar's sanity shattered. His mind changed. The greatest king on earth became like a beast. He was driven from human society, from his palace, from his throne, and for 7 years he lived in the wilderness eating grass, his body drenched with dew, his hair growing long and matted like eagle feathers, his nails becoming like bird claws. Archaeological and historical evidence supports this account. Ancient historians, including Berosus the Babylonian and Abydos, record that Nebuchadnezzar became ill late in his reign and acted strangely before his death. Medical experts have identified a rare psychological condition called boanthropy, in which a person believes they are a cow or ox and exhibits animal-like behavior. Nebuchadnezzar's condition, whether supernatural or psychological or some combination, was real. For 7 years, the empire continued without him. His son or a regent must have managed affairs, and during those 7 years, what went through whatever consciousness remained in Nebuchadnezzar's animal mind. Was there a part of him that still remembered who he was? A glimmer of awareness watching his own degradation, unable to do anything about it? This is what happens when pride goes unchecked, when we start believing we are the source of our own success, when we forget that every breath, every talent, every opportunity exists only because God allows it. We're not punished for pride. Pride itself is the punishment. It separates us from reality, from community, from God, and ultimately from our own humanity. But the story doesn't end in the wilderness. At the appointed time, exactly 7 years after the judgment began, something changed. Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes toward heaven. That simple act, looking up, acknowledging something beyond himself, was the key that unlocked his prison. His sanity returned. His understanding came back, and the first thing he did was praise God, not make excuses, not blame others, not try to save face. He praised, "I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?' That's true humility. That's understanding your place in the universe. That's recognizing that God's sovereignty isn't negotiable, isn't optional, isn't subject to human approval. And with that acknowledgement came restoration. Nebuchadnezzar's advisors sought him out. He was returned to his throne. His honor and splendor were restored. He became even greater than before. But now he ruled with wisdom born of humility, with the knowledge that everything he had was a gift, not an achievement. The story ends with Nebuchadnezzar's own testimony. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble." Subscribe if this message is hitting you where you live. Pride is subtle. It creeps in. It whispers that your success is all you're doing, that you've earned what you have, that you're self-made, and God in his mercy sometimes has to bring us low to teach us the truth. Comment below, have you ever experienced a humbling that you now recognize as God's mercy rather than punishment? Coming up next, we're moving forward in time. Nebuchadnezzar is dead, a new king sits on Babylon's throne, and on one fateful night, this foolish young king is going to commit an act of sacrilege so profound that his kingdom will fall before the sun rises. The writing on the wall, the judgment pronounced. The empire that seemed invincible collapsing in hours. You won't want to miss this. Chapter 6. The last night of Babylon. Handwriting and judgment. Decades had passed since Nebuchadnezzar's death. The great king who learned humility the hard way was gone, and his successors had learned nothing from his example. By the time our story continues, Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, ruled as regent in Babylon, and Belshazzar was everything his grandfather had become at his worst, with none of the wisdom his grandfather gained through suffering. Daniel was now an old man, probably in his 80s. He had served faithfully through multiple administrations, through regime changes, through the slow moral decay of Babylon's leadership. He had watched the empire's spiritual darkness deepen. He had seen corruption flourish, and he knew from studying the prophecies of Jeremiah that Babylon's time was nearly finished. On this particular night, October 12, 539 BC, Babylon was under siege. The armies of Cyrus the Great, ruler of the Medo-Persian Empire, surrounded the city. But inside the walls, Belshazzar wasn't worried. Babylon's defenses were legendary. The walls were so thick and so high that no army could breach them. The city had supplies to withstand a siege for years. So while an enemy force camped outside, Belshazzar decided to throw a party. Not just any party, a banquet for 1,000 nobles, a massive display of arrogance and excess in the face of danger. Wine flowed, music played, and in his drunken state, Belshazzar made a decision that would seal not just his fate, but the fate of the entire Babylonian Empire. He ordered his servants to bring out the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. These weren't ordinary cups, they were sacred vessels used in the worship of God in his holy temple. They had been stored away for decades as spoils of war. Even Nebuchadnezzar, for all his pride, had never used them for a pagan feast. But Belshazzar had no such restraint. He and his nobles drank from these holy vessels while praising their gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. They were mocking the God of Israel, desecrating what was holy, celebrating their own power and their own deities while literally drinking from objects dedicated to Yahweh. This was more than cultural insensitivity. This was spiritual warfare. This was a declaration that Babylon's gods had defeated Israel's God, that the forces of darkness had triumphed over the forces of light. This was the ultimate act of defiance and sacrilege. Then, in the middle of the laughter and celebration, something impossible happened. A disembodied hand appeared. Just a hand, no body attached. It materialized out of thin air near the lampstand and began writing on the plastered wall of the palace. The fingers moved deliberately, inscribing words in a script everyone could see but no one could understand. The party stopped immediately. The music died. The laughter turned to horrified silence. All eyes turned to the wall where glowing letters spelled out full words. Men, tekel, parsin. Belshazzar's reaction was visceral and immediate. His face turned pale, his knees knocked together. His legs gave way beneath him. Whatever those words meant, he knew instinctively that they meant something terrible. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't an illusion. This was God himself writing a message of judgment for the king and his empire. "Bring in the enchanters and astrologers," Belshazzar shouted. "Anyone who can read this writing and tell me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Notice that he offered the third highest position, not the second. Belshazzar himself was only regent, ruling on behalf of his father Nabonidus, who was absent from the city, so the best he could offer was third place. But it didn't matter. All the wise men came rushing in, and all of them failed. They stared at the writing, they consulted their texts and their demon spirits, but none of them could interpret the message. The Queen Mother, hearing the commotion, came into the banquet hall. This was likely the widow of Nebuchadnezzar, a woman who remembered the glory days when Daniel served her husband. "O king, live forever, don't be alarmed, don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your grandfather appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. So Daniel was brought before the king. Imagine the scene: an elderly Hebrew prophet, dressed simply, walking into a hall full of drunken nobles and a terrified king. Belshazzar, trying to maintain composure, addressed Daniel. "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my grandfather brought from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Daniel's response was blunt and fearless. "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means." Then, before interpreting the message, Daniel did something Belshazzar didn't expect. He delivered a history lesson and a rebuke. "O king, the Most High God gave your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes." Every word was true. Every person in that room knew it, and everyone also knew what Daniel was about to say next would condemn the king. But you, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines drank from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. The silence in that hall must have been deafening. Daniel, an elderly captive with no military power, no political leverage, nothing but the authority of truth, was telling the most powerful man in Babylon that he was a fool, that he had defied God, that he had learned nothing from history, and everyone present knew Daniel was right. Therefore God sent the hand that wrote the inscription. "This is what these words mean, men. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Pairs, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." The judgment was pronounced. The verdict was in, not in some distant future, but immediately. That very night, Belshazzar's kingdom was finished. To his credit, or perhaps because he was too stunned to do otherwise, Belshazzar kept his word. He commanded that Daniel be clothed in purple, that a gold chain be placed around his neck, and that he be proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. But a promotion in a kingdom that has hours to live is meaningless. While the banquet hall was still processing Daniel's words, events were already in motion outside. The armies of Cyrus had diverted the Euphrates River, which flowed under Babylon's walls. As the water level dropped, Persian soldiers marched along the riverbed, entering the city through the waterway that the Babylonians had left unguarded because they believed their walls made them invincible. That night, while Belshazzar was still trying to comprehend the writing on the wall, Persian soldiers stormed the palace. The king was killed. The Babylonian Empire, which had seemed eternal, fell in a single night, exactly as the prophecy foretold, exactly as the handwriting declared. The lesson is stark. No kingdom, no matter how powerful, can stand when it defies God. No ruler, no matter how secure they feel, is beyond divine judgment. And ignoring the lessons of history, especially ignoring what God has clearly revealed, always leads to catastrophe. But here's a question worth pondering. What writing is on the wall of our own civilization? What warnings are we ignoring? What acts of defiance against God are we celebrating while judgment approaches? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This isn't just ancient history. This is a pattern that repeats across generations. Like and subscribe if this message is resonating with you, and share this with someone who needs to hear that God's justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied. Coming up next, we're entering the final phase of Daniel's life. The Babylonian Empire is gone, replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel is now in his 80s, serving yet another regime, and he's about to face perhaps his greatest test, a choice between compromising his prayer life or facing a den of hungry lions. It's the most famous story about Daniel, but there's so much more to it than you learned in Sunday school. Stay with me. Chapter 7. The Lions den older gens den holtermerensing fehaf. The Medo-Persian Empire amazing faith. The Medo-Persian Empire now ruled where Babylon once stood. New rulers, new policies, new administration, but one constant remained: Daniel's faithfulness. He was now in his 80s, an age when most people would be retired, enjoying whatever comfort their years of service had earned them. But Daniel was still serving, still influencing, still making a difference. King Darius the Mede recognized Daniel's exceptional character and abilities immediately. He established 120 satraps to govern the empire's provinces, with 3 administrators supervising them. Daniel was one of these 3, but Daniel distinguished himself so remarkably that Darius planned to set him over the entire kingdom. You'd think people would respect someone like Daniel, an elderly man with decades of impeccable service, proven wisdom, demonstrated integrity, but jealousy doesn't respect age or achievement. The other administrators and satraps were furious that this foreigner, this Hebrew exile, was about to be promoted above them. So they did what envious people always do. They looked for dirt. They investigated Daniel's government work, searching for corruption, incompetence, anything they could use to discredit him. But they found nothing. Not one error in his records, not one shady deal, not one bribe, not one corner cut. Daniel's work was flawless, his character beyond reproach. Frustrated, they finally admitted, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." Think about that. The only way to trap Daniel was to make faithfulness to God illegal. That's how consistent his integrity was. So they hatched a plan. They went to King Darius with a proposal that sounded reasonable on the surface, but was designed specifically to destroy Daniel. "O King Darius, live forever! All the royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have agreed that the king should issue a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being, except to you, O king, during the next 30 days, should be thrown into the lion's den." This was flattery combined with manipulation. Make the king the supreme object of worship for 30 days. Issue the decree in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. The trap was brilliant because it exploited a unique aspect of Medo-Persian law. Even the king couldn't change a law once it was signed. Darius, flattered and unaware of the conspiracy, signed the decree. Now it was illegal to pray to anyone except the king for 30 days. Violation meant death by lions. The lion's den wasn't a zoo enclosure. It was an execution chamber where hungry lions were kept specifically for disposing of criminals and enemies of the state. When Daniel learned that the decree had been signed, he went home. And what he did next has inspired believers for 25 centuries. He went to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Let's pause here. Daniel was a wise man, not a fool. He understood the situation perfectly. He knew this decree was designed to trap him. He had multiple options. He could have prayed silently in his heart where no one would know. He could have closed his windows. He could have gone into a back room. He could have reasoned, "God knows my heart. I can skip formal prayers for 30 days. It's not worth dying over." But Daniel did none of those things. He opened his windows toward Jerusalem, knelt down, and prayed aloud, exactly as he always had, 3 times a day, on his knees, giving thanks to God. Why? Because for Daniel, Prayer wasn't just a habit or a religious duty. It was his lifeline, his connection to the source of his strength, his wisdom, his very identity. To compromise on prayer meant compromising who he was. The conspirators were watching, of course. They immediately reported to the king. Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. King Darius was instantly distressed. He liked Daniel. He trusted Daniel. He had plans to promote Daniel. He realized immediately that he'd been manipulated, that his administrators had used his vanity to set a trap. For the rest of that day, the king desperately tried to find a legal loophole, some way to save Daniel. But there was none. The law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed, not even by the king who made it. As sunset approached, the conspirators returned to press their advantage. Remember, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. They weren't going to let him escape this. Reluctantly, with a heavy heart, King Darius gave the order. Daniel was arrested and brought to the lion's den. As Daniel was being led away, the king said to him, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." There was hope in those words, but not much confidence. Darius was grasping at straws, praying to a God he didn't really know, hoping for a miracle he had no reason to expect. Daniel was thrown into the den, and a stone was placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that nothing could be changed concerning Daniel. Then Darius returned to his palace. He refused food. He refused entertainment. He couldn't sleep. All night long, he was tormented by what he'd been forced to do. Meanwhile, in the den, Daniel found himself surrounded by lions. These weren't tame animals. These were apex predators, kept deliberately hungry to ensure they would attack immediately. They should have torn Daniel apart the moment he hit the ground, but they didn't. An angel of the Lord had shut their mouths. All night long, Daniel sat among lions that could have killed him in seconds, completely unharmed, protected by divine intervention. At dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near, he called out in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And from inside the den came Daniel's voice, calm and strong. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king." The king was overjoyed. He gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den immediately. When Daniel was brought up, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Not a scratch, not a bite mark, nothing. Then Darius's anger turned to those who had conspired against Daniel. He ordered that they be thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. And before they even reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. This demonstrated something crucial. The lions weren't harmless. They were perfectly capable of killing. God's protection of Daniel was a genuine miracle, not a natural phenomenon. King Darius then wrote a decree to all peoples and nations throughout his kingdom. "I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." An elderly man who refused to compromise his prayer life became the catalyst for a pagan king to acknowledge the true God to all nations under his rule. That's the power of faithfulness. That's what happens when you refuse to bow. Subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs encouragement to stand firm. Comment below. Have you ever had to stand alone for what you believe in? What happened? Coming next, we're going to explore something most people never hear about: Daniel's visions of the end times, the 70 weeks prophecy, the abomination of desolation, the resurrection of the dead. These prophecies are detailed, controversial, and shockingly relevant to our world today. Don't miss it. Chapter 8, Beyond the Veil Angles, Demons and the Battle for Nations. Daniel was now very old, probably in his mid-80s, living under Persian rule but never forgetting Jerusalem. He spent his time studying the scriptures, particularly the prophecies of Jeremiah. Jeremiah 25:11-12 had predicted that the exile would last 70 years. Daniel calculated that the time was almost up. His people should be returning home soon, but there was no sign of it happening. So Daniel did what he had always done. He prayed, but this wasn't ordinary prayer. He fasted for 3 weeks, eating no choice food, no meat, no wine. He dressed in sackcloth and ashes, mourning for his people and pleading with God for understanding. Why was the restoration delayed? What was God's plan for Israel? What would happen to the nations that had conquered them? On the 24th day of his fast, as Daniel stood on the bank of the Tigris River, he looked up and saw a vision that overwhelmed him. A man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold around his waist. His body was like topaz, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. This wasn't an ordinary angel. Many scholars believe this was a Christophany, an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ. Daniel's companions didn't see the vision, but they felt such terror that they ran and hid. Daniel was left alone, and the sight of this glorious being drained all strength from him. Then a hand touched him and set him trembling on his hands and knees. A voice said, "Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you." What the angel said next pulls back the curtain on a reality most of us never think about. Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. This is crucial. From the first day Daniel started praying 21 days earlier, God heard his prayer and dispatched an answer immediately. But the angel was delayed for 3 full weeks. Why? But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. The prince of Persia, this wasn't a human prince. This was a powerful demonic entity, a territorial spirit assigned to the Persian Empire. This angel, sent with God's answer to Daniel's prayer, was blocked by a demon for 3 entire weeks. There was a battle in the spiritual realm, invisible to human eyes, a fight over the destiny of nations. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Michael the archangel, the protector of Israel, had to intervene to break the deadlock. Only with Michael's help could this angel break through enemy lines to deliver God's message to Daniel. This wasn't a quick skirmish. This was sustained spiritual warfare lasting weeks. This revelation is staggering. It tells us that behind the visible world of nations and empires, there's an invisible world of spiritual powers in conflict. Ephesians 6:12 confirms this. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Every nation, it seems, has a demonic entity assigned to it, a principality that influences its culture, its government, its spiritual trajectory. These aren't metaphors. These are actual spiritual beings with intelligence, power, and agendas opposed to God's purposes. Think about what this means for prayer. When you pray and don't see immediate answers, it doesn't necessarily mean God isn't listening. There may be spiritual opposition you're completely unaware of. Demonic forces might be fighting to prevent the answer from reaching you. And your continued faithfulness in prayer, like Daniel's 3 weeks of fasting and pleading, matters in that unseen battle. The Book of Enoch provides additional context. It describes the Watchers, the fallen angels who descended to earth and corrupted humanity. After the flood, these beings and their demonic offspring were restricted but not destroyed. They became the spiritual forces behind pagan religions, the demons that demanded sacrifice and worship, the principalities that rule over nations and territories. When Daniel prayed, he wasn't just dealing with human politics. He was engaging in spiritual warfare against ancient, powerful, malevolent beings that had been in rebellion against God since before the flood. And his prayers mattered. They mattered enough that heaven dispatched an angel. They mattered enough that Michael himself got involved. They mattered enough that the demonic prince of Persia fought for 3 weeks to prevent the answer. If you're finding this revelation eye-opening, subscribe now. We're going deep into mysteries most churches never teach, and share this with someone who needs to understand that prayer is spiritual warfare, not just religious routine. After explaining the delay, the angel began to reveal future events to Daniel. He spoke of conflicts between kingdoms, of wars and treachery, of kings who would rise and fall. These weren't vague predictions. They were specific, detailed prophecies about events that would unfold over the next several centuries. But then came the prophecy that has stirred controversy for over 2,000 years. Daniel 9:2-4-27, known as the 70 weeks prophecy. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make rentilation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to feel loss and mekawitie for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. In biblical prophecy, so 70 weeks equals 490 years. This prophecy predicted that from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until the coming of the Messiah, there would be 483 years, 69 weeks. After that, the Messiah would be cut off, killed, and then a final period of 7 years, the 70th week, would bring about the end of the age. The math is stunning. If you start from the decree of Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC, Nehemiah 2:1-8, and count forward 483 years using the prophetic calendar of 360-day years, you arrive at approximately 33 AD, the year of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. This prophecy, given to Daniel around 530 BC, predicted the exact timing of the Messiah's appearance and death 560 years before it happened. No wonder skeptics have spent centuries trying to discredit the book of Daniel. If this prophecy is genuine, it's irrefutable proof of divine revelation. But the prophecy doesn't end there. There's a gap between the 69th and 70th week. The final 7 years, many scholars believe, are still future. This is the period often called the tribulation, a time of unprecedented trouble when the Antichrist will arise, when the abomination of desolation will stand in a rebuilt temple, when God will pour out judgments on a rebellious world before Christ returns to establish his eternal kingdom. Daniel was also given visions of 4 beasts rising from the sea, representing 4 successive empires: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. He saw a little horn arising that spoke blasphemies against God. He saw the Ancient of Days taking his seat in judgment. He saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven, given dominion over all nations, a prophecy Jesus claimed for himself in the Gospels. The angel told Daniel, "Seal up these prophecies, for they concern the time of the end." But he also said, "Those who are wise will understand." We're living in a time when these prophecies are becoming clearer, when events are aligning in ways that make Daniel's ancient visions suddenly urgent and relevant. Before leaving, the angel told Daniel something sobering. "Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go, the prince of Greece will come." The battle wasn't over. As one empire fell and another rose, different spiritual powers would take prominence. The cosmic war continues, age after age. Coming up in our final chapter, we'll explore Daniel's last recorded vision, his prophecy about the resurrection of the dead, and what his life teaches us about living faithfully in a corrupt world. This is where everything comes together. Don't miss it. Chapter 9. The End of the Age, Daniel's final prophecy. In Daniel 12, the prophet receives his final and perhaps most mysterious prophecy. The angel Michael, the great prince who protects Daniel's people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at time your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. This is the Great Tribulation, the period Jesus referred to in Matthew 24:21, when he said, "For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again." Daniel was seeing the end times, the final conflict before God's kingdom is fully established on earth. But then the angel said something that changed everything about how the ancient Hebrews understood death and afterlife. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. This is the clearest Old Testament prophecy about the resurrection of the dead, not reincarnation, not soul sleep, not annihilation, actual bodily resurrection. Some to eternal life with God, others to eternal judgment, individual accountability beyond death, eternal consequences for temporal choices. The angel concluded with mysterious time periods: 1,260 days, 1,260 days, 1,260 time days. These numbers have puzzled scholars for centuries. They clearly relate to the end times, to the period of the Antichrist's reign, to events surrounding the tribulation. But their exact meaning remains partially sealed, waiting for the time when they will be fully understood. Then the angel told Daniel, "Go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance." This was both a promise and a release. Daniel wouldn't see the fulfillment of these prophecies in his lifetime. He would die in exile, never returning to Jerusalem, never seeing the temple rebuilt, never witnessing the restoration he'd prayed for his entire life. But he would rise. He would be resurrected. He would receive his reward. His faithfulness in this life guaranteed his inheritance in the next. And that's how Daniel's recorded story ends. No dramatic conclusion. No account of his death, just a quiet assurance that he would rest and then rise. According to tradition, Daniel died around 530 BC, probably in his late 80s, in the city of Susa in Persia. He lived his entire adult life in exile, never going home. But what a legacy! Daniel influenced multiple empires. He revealed God's plans to pagan kings. He remained faithful through tests that would have destroyed most people. He saved lives through his wisdom. He interpreted dreams and visions that shaped the course of history. He left us prophecies that are still being fulfilled today. So what can we learn from Daniel's extraordinary life? First, faithfulness matters more than outcomes. Daniel didn't set out to become powerful. He simply determined to remain faithful to God regardless of circumstances, and God used that faithfulness to accomplish purposes Daniel never imagined. Second, integrity is built through small daily choices. Daniel's ability to stand firm in the lion's den was built through decades of daily prayer, daily refusal to compromise, daily commitment to living with integrity even when no one was watching. Third, you can engage with culture without being consumed by it. Daniel learned Babylonian language and literature. He served in pagan governments. He adapted to his environment. But he never lost his identity, never compromised his core convictions, never worshipped false gods. Fourth, prayer is spiritual warfare. Daniel's life demonstrates that prayer isn't just personal therapy or religious routine. It's engagement with spiritual realities. It's participating in cosmic battles. It matters in ways we can't see and often won't understand until eternity. Fifth, God's sovereignty transcends human kingdoms. Daniel saw empire after empire rise and fall. He understood that no earthly power is ultimate, that God's purposes are being worked out through history, that kingdoms come and go, but God's kingdom endures forever. Finally, faithfulness is rewarded, if not in this life, Then in the next, Daniel never saw many of the things he prayed for. He died in exile, but he died with the promise that he would rise, that he would receive his inheritance, that his faithfulness mattered and would be rewarded. We're living in a time that eerily parallels Daniel's era. We live in a secular Babylon surrounded by idolatry, pressured to compromise our faith, watching spiritual darkness increase. The question isn't whether we'll face tests. The question is whether we'll stand firm when they come. Daniel's story challenges us to live differently, to refuse to bow to cultural idols, to maintain our prayer life regardless of opposition, to serve with integrity in corrupt systems, to trust God even when circumstances scream that He's forgotten us. The God who shut the lions' mouths is still powerful today. The God who protected 3 men in a furnace is still present. The God who revealed mysteries to Daniel still speaks to those who seek Him. The God who promised resurrection and eternal reward still keeps His promises. Subscribe if this journey through Daniel's life has impacted you. Share it with someone who needs encouragement to stand firm. And comment below, what's the biggest lesson you're taking away from Daniel's story? Thank you for walking through this incredible life with me. Daniel was a man who never bowed to anything except the one worthy of worship, who stood firm when everyone else was falling down, who trusted God when circumstances screamed that God had abandoned him, who remained faithful through tests that would have destroyed most people, and because of that faithfulness, his life still speaks 25 centuries later. The question is, will our lives speak to future generations? Will we leave a legacy of faithfulness like Daniel did? Or will we be forgotten because we chose comfort over conviction, compromise over courage? The choice is ours. May we have the courage to be Daniels in our own time, in our own place, facing our own trials. May we discover that the God who protected Daniel is still on his throne, and may we live with such integrity that people see not just us, but the God we serve. Until next time, stand firm, pray boldly, trust deeply, refuse to bow. God bless you.